Coming from the perspective of someone who was just hired by a school district to create a more inclusive environment, I would start answering the first question of how do schools reinforce heteronormativity by just kind of explaining that heteronormativity at the current moment kind of perpetuates this idea of properness and normality based on heterosexual cisgender students who are acting on their heterosexual cisgender urges, desires, things of that nature. So this could even extend to, the idea of male students being viewed as more rambunctious and troublesome and having their behavior written off by certain teachers, which I've experienced in my time as a K through 12 student, where a lot of male students were their disruptive behavior to the classroom was written off as just them, as it being a part of their adolescent experience, with them being rambunctious and loud and disruptive, when really it was disrupting the learning environment for other students like myself who needed a quiet, more settled place to focus, and that was kind of ignored and just neglected because they were viewed as being boys. Other small things to that regard included just small things like having male students assigned for more strenuous tasks, whether that was physical, mental, as an academic, or just anything to that effect, versus a lot of female students were picked for more simple, easy tasks, whether that was sharpening pencils or taking something to the front office, whereas boys were often tasked with helping. A teacher would ask a male student to help them fix their computer, or fix the pencil sharpener, versus having a female student sharpen the pencil. So it's just little stuff like that, where I definitely think at the current moment that schools have reinforced heteronormativity and this sense of normality with a student's sex matching with their gender. With that said, I think that schools at times marginalize gender and sexual diversity. I've seen this happen a lot in my experience, where teachers don't always act right away on students when they're making inappropriate comments or jokes about LGBTQ plus students. I would say this extends to any jokes made across any students, whether it's a racially motivated joke, whether it's a sexist joke, whether it's a joke directly towards a student who identifies as LGBTQ plus. Either way, I've seen it a lot across the board, where there have just been teachers who do not step in as they should. Even coming at it from a neutral standpoint of just perpetuating a positive learning environment by quelling those jokes. Even then, I've seen it a lot of times where teachers just don't. So I think that's one way where schools at times marginalize gender and sexual diversity, because it forces LGBTQ plus students to view themselves as inferior, because teachers, administrators aren't even taking the time to advocate for them and validate their feelings in that sense. And so with that, I would say for addressing the last question about how could educational spaces affirm the identities of LGBTQ plus students, I think in general, teachers have to come at anything social, political, societal from a neutral lens, not leaning one way towards one side or the other, right? And so with that, I think, as someone in this case, from the perspective of someone being hired from a school district, wanting to create a more inclusive environment across the school community, I would say for teachers, it's just about emphasizing the importance and the value of respecting the learning environment, as in the classroom. And so even if that means having teachers, up front at the beginning of the school year, tell their students, like, look, this is the learning environment where we're all here to learn and grow and develop as students, as scholars. as individuals, and part of creating a positive learning environment is just respecting everyone for their differences and just who they are, and not necessarily leaning one way towards the other politically or socially or anything like that. Um, this kind of relates to my next kind of point I noted here, as far as educators just being very clear and firm and upfront about bullying and Title IX policies, uh, of course, for all students, but I'd say, especially for LGBTQ plus students, just because um, there could just be a lot of issues with that, especially in regards to just typical bullying in Title IX. In my experience in K through 12, a lot of those instances happen in locker rooms, the boys' locker rooms, bathrooms, where boys were just, hitting on beating up on each other, accusing one student of, being homosexual, and just having that cause a whole onslaught of issues. So, just making those policies clear, those anti-bullying policies, just from the get-go, once again, to explain that it's about the positive learning environment and how that involves just respecting your colleagues, in this case, the other students. And I think as a whole, when you make policies like that clear, it allows all students, including LGBTQ plus students, obviously, but all students to just feel comfortable sharing their difficulties and their experiences with their teacher, because they know that whatever they share, if it's something to an extreme degree, it's going to be acted upon. And once again, that goes back into the positive learning environment, because then every student in the classroom feels validated. They feel like they're being respected as a student, an individual, a learner, a scholar, because the whole point is to create a safe environment for them to feel like they can grow and thrive. So, yeah, I hope this makes sense, and thank you guys for your time.